And so if risks are supposed to be predicated on offense, our people should be scoring very low risk and being bounced right out of these systems and into social supports. What we see though is our people are held often pre-trial even because of a high level of need around housing, around mental health supports, around jobs and education and those sorts of things. And so we see that the drivers into detention for trans people are often our socioeconomic positioning and our varying needs rather than high levels of risk. Given that, trans people are disproportionately held pre-trial and are held for longer length of stays for the same offenses as people who are not trans. Part of the way that people are trying to interrupt this trend is through using better risk assessment screens and intake mechanisms at the front door. We could have a whole training or a whole workshop on how risk assessment instruments get validated and developed. They are not validated or developed with community input. And so often even jurisdictions that put in these types of tools, we still see a disproportionate amount of trans people entering these systems. I want to talk a little bit about how we can stem that tide, but just to lay out the context really clearly. In some places, we actually also have a large amount of trans people who are in jail because they can simply not afford bail. And so we often see that the data shows us that trans people are matriculating through the system. They're staying in the front end, or we're staying in the front end of the system because our offenses aren't egregious enough to process us through maybe to the back end, or we're just languishing, waiting for a trial because we can't afford bail. And so you see a disproportionate amount of poor and POC trans folks that are populating the front end of the criminal and juvenile justice system, oftentimes for poverty crimes or not being able to afford bail. So I want to circle back to that as something people are doing now to stem this trend. The other things I wanted to highlight here, I think Ms. Major's going to speak to some of this stuff, but we often see that how folks deal with trans people, how we're dealt with in prisons, is often left up to the prison itself and left up to the proclivities of that warden or that staff. So there's very little general guidelines about how trans people should be treated, even like basic human rights standards. Some of that has now been articulated in the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA, but oftentimes those of us who have sought and worked for justice for a long time understand the difference between passing policy and implementing policy so that you actualize the change. So with something like PREA on paper, it looks a particular way, but inside facilities, still the most common occurrences is the use of solitary confinement for incredible lengths of time for trans people on the basis that it's for our own safety. That's a practice that the international courts have deemed as torture, and is not something that, for instance, PREA speaks to. And so on the issue of solitary confinement, also on the issues of visits, programming variances, healthcare, access to hormones, it ends up being a very case-by-case basis, given what that warden or what that staff is apt to do or not do. So you see a lot of what we talk about as justice by geography. If you're in jail or prison in San Francisco, you're gonna have more access to hormones than if you're in jail in another place in the country that might not have as many eyes watching or have liberal as tendencies. And so we always tell people that if you want to support trans people in prison, go local. Go and look at your local police departments, your sheriff's departments, your jails and your prisons, and look at what type of non-discrimination policies do they have, what type of training do their people receive, what type of local programs are available inside, and then work on a one-to-one basis with that local stakeholder around making things better. We often also find that we are a bit mysterious to people. Like now, because we're on TV, people are like, oh, trans people. I get it, you know, orange is the new black. I had somebody tell me that the other day. And while it's nice that people watch TV and now know that we exist, there's very there is an appetite to engage in dialogue and sometimes make some interventions and innovations based on best practices and offering information. So I am an organizer by trade. I believe in the wide spectrum of what organizing is. And I would always encourage people to start with asking for meetings with some of the power brokers and some of the system folks that run these systems or these institutions, and work smart organizing plans from there. But don't assume that it's going to be automatically antagonistic and automatically a no. That kind of information comes through good organizing and collecting our own data. And so if setting up those kind of informational sessions or getting more information about your local facilities is something you're interested in, Kendra and Beck and Major have my contact information, and I would be happy to help walk people through, here's a stakeholder I know that is in that state even, and probably wouldn't mind doing a peer-to-peer call to a judge in your local area or to a stakeholder in your local area to help you get in the door. So that's something that we do. I also want to just end by pointing people towards some of the campaigns right now around bail reform. Song is doing some really amazing work around bail reform. The Pretrial Justice Institute is also working throughout the South with stakeholders who are criminal justice stakeholders. So they're a group that you could call and say, is there a sheriff? Is there somebody who is inside the system that wants to see change that could be my ally, that people would be able to access? And then the last thing I want to point people to is the Free Kai Peterson campaign. Kai is a trans man who he's jailed and given quite a lot of years for, he was being sexually assaulted, and he used his attacker's weapon on them and ended up killing his attacker. He has faced tons of transphobic and racist treatment so far, and his case is one of extreme injustice that folks around the country are now taking up and looking at and pushing around trans rights, around issues around Black Lives Mattering, and as a very tangible way you can get in and participate right now if you're interested in helping trans people in prison who are in need. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Song is Southerners on New Ground, what he had mentioned to you all. And they're a wonderful contact person because they're really out there. I hate this thing. Malachi, you don't have one of these, and that's not fair. Okay, I won't go there. Anyway, Southerners on New Ground is doing really marvelous work in trying to get things to be a little bit more fair than what you have to pay to get on a damn bus. It's in treatment to other people. And the work and stuff that they're doing, it is in order to correct not just the horrors that they're doing, but it's the malicious, intentional, and continuous abuses, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. That's happening to transgender people, male and female, within the prison system, by the police, by the courts, by the jails when they do sentence you. And the crimes primarily that my community is winding up doing are for survival. It's to keep ourselves alive. No one's gonna let you live anywhere for free. Cute as you might be, you gotta pay rent. And food ain't free. And if you go to a place that has free food, peanut butter and jelly, that's not food. You can't get a good meal. And then you have to buy clothing. Then you have to get around. And so just to do those things, because we can't get educated, we can't go to colleges, they're not going to give us an opportunity to work and maintain a job and keep us living in at least a comfortable situation. You have to do something in order to survive. You have to do something that is just outside what is set up as the legal system here. Well, that legal shit doesn't work all the time. And so it isn't just my community that has to do that. There are people out there who are cisgender people. A mother who's raising her children alone. She has more than one. She's got to go out at night to hook and then stay hot up take care of her children during the day. Well, she can't do that just on her breathing air every day. She's going to need drugs. She's going to have to buy the drugs. And how is she going to get the money for the drugs to take care of her children? Not because she wants to party and have a good time. She's not no girl dancing on top of the table, drinking a lot of beer, and having any guy that comes along. They're doing this to survive, to be comfortable, to live a decent and comfortable life. And why aren't we allowed to do that as people? Because the powers that be don't see us as people. They want us eradicated and erased from the generalization of humankind. This president has his head stuffed so far up his ass, he's not giving the world a chance to understand who we are as people. Erasing terminology, just because you can't say transgender people on a form, doesn't mean that we don't exist. You know, and all of us are not going to be in Orange is the New Black. Thank you for mentioning that, darling. Because all of us are not Laverne Cox. All of us are not tall and pretty and doing this stuff. And so what winds up happening when these things happen, and she appeared on the cover of Time magazine, there's a ripple effect going on. There's people out there who don't approve of that, but they can't get to her. But they can get to the girl who's in your local area. Transgender woman who's in a town that's next to theirs, that they can see walking along the street, minding her business, trying to get from point A to point B, not bothering anybody. And they drive over, jump on her, beat her up, and kick her ass. Why should we have to pay for someone else's thoughts? Because they can't deal with who we are as people. And within the system, even if we are attacked, nobody cares. So if somebody jumps on you and you fight back, supposedly it's justifiable. You have the right to do that to defend your body. Not if you're a transgender person. You fight back and you wind up getting arrested and charged for assault, like that young man that he just talked about, and going to prison. Just run you through jail, run you through the court system, and send your ass directly to jail. Does that seem fair or right or just? And in this system today, the way that they're doing these kind of things is once you get in there, you are completely at the mercy of whomever happens to be there at the time, whatever guard is on duty that day. Because the warden doesn't care, who's ever in charge of all the guards, they don't care. We're not a community that people are going to be concerned about the degradation and the harm and the danger that we live each and every day just by stepping into a breath of air. We don't have the opportunity to even exist as people because the powers that be deem us not worthy. I watch TV like everybody does, and I like Law and Order, but why isn't it justice and fair play? You know, why isn't it something out there that lets people know that you can't treat people like this? You can't pick a group of folks and just degrade them because you don't happen to like or understand who they are, you know? These people who are doing this stuff aren't God, but they're behaving like they are. They're creating laws and a justice system that says, well, since you don't exist, we're going to punish you. Since we don't believe in you, we're going to do everything we can to make you wish you weren't breathing, to wish you weren't here. And what that does is that so works on how you think about yourself, how you live in a society, how you get along with other people. Racism is really bad in this country still. But there's progress. There's things like this that he's on, because he's in San Francisco and I'm here in Little Rock, Arkansas. Yay for progress. What does that help people who can't do those things? How is that a benefit to us as human people, as humankind? Because we're all related to one another in this damn room. Whether I know you all or not, we're still a part of what is considered the human family. And so what is wrong with being able to utilize that and connect to one another in spite of the system that's out there to put their foot on our neck and make us pay for the decision that they're making? And yes, right now they're after my community. Who knows what's going to happen once they feel that they've eradicated us? they're gonna come after you on next. This man doesn't give a damn about anybody but himself, making more money at our expense. You know, it's hard for all of us to survive and love our families and care about our loved ones and make sure that we don't wind up within this penal system that's going to make us pay for taking a breath. I've been arrested myself. I have 2 felonies, and when I got arrested, and they got me in there, they stripped me of all my clothes. I've been on hormones for years. They shaved my head, shaved my armpit, shaved my pubic hairs, and made me walk around the prison completely naked for all these guys to see me from their jail cells as they paraded me around on these chairs. That's humiliating and demeaning, and you have to fight and struggle and hold on to who you are as a person in order to get through this bullshit that they are constantly shoving down people's throats. And it isn't just transgender people. It's any black and brown person that happens to get caught up in whatever is going on for surviving, not because they want to do better, you know, or doing drugs. We don't bring drugs into this country. How the hell did they get in here? And I'm sorry, I was here when whatever President Price said, oh, just say no. Yeah, okay, that's really cute. I said no, and I still wound up with you. Where does that come from? You know? And so this thing of finding out what's going on within this prison system, like he's saying, it's completely degrading. And if we're in there after they've abused and taken their field day with us, we can't complain about having roommates that are molesting us within ourselves, because then they lock us up. And then you can't be in there and take advantage of programs that are initiated to help you do a better bid, learn how to get along in society according to society's rules, and get out of there if you're in the hole. Because then you're considered, you're definitely not worth breathing, then you're not worth living, and then you're taking up too much damn space. And once they throw you in there, they don't see you, they don't know that you exist, and it's like being buried in a hole like a mole, you know? So where does all of this come from? And how do we change that? We change that through what you all do to try to make it different. Find out what transgender people are in the jails and stuff here in Arkansas, and then working on finding out what to do to make it not comfortable or better, but to make it decent and fair, like you would treat another human. The rest of a chicken a day. You know, the shit happens to be too much at me in my face, other than I'm gonna kick your ass. You know, the system we're suffering in because of this abuse that they're going through, and the right that they feel to do this. You know, one of the things that winds up happening with this prison industrial complex is because of the money that they get, because of the cities that they have existing, simply because there's a prison within their proper. People in that town have jobs. They have money coming in. Their dads and cousins and uncles can work in the prison and make $75,000, $80,000 a year for going into a jail every day and locking their damn self up for 10 hours a day, watching somebody suffer and do without and be degraded and humiliated every day and get paid for it and raise a family on it. A town can pop up behind it. You know, I got arrested in New York, and same thing again, more on Greenhaven. They all have little towns that are 5 miles away from the prison, doing good because the prison is there. And the system has gotten so bad, it's not just the government that's doing this. Prisons are now owned by private people who are making money on the prison, and we're suffering, you know? So it's a matter of making sure that you all take this information and utilize it to tell other people about this so that you can make it better. You know, and I'm not saying the prison should be like going on a retreat and playing tennis and volleyball, but goddamn, you know, you did something wrong. This is what you do to make up for it. Now, try to have a better life. People have been told, oh, prisons aren't doing what they were meant to do. Well, that sounds really cute, but yes, they are. They were made to lock people up, separate them from their family, make them pay for what this other person feels as if they did against the rules of society. Well, there's other ways to do that. And yes, I was eradicated from this country. The only problem of being able to do that within my lifetime is once you decide to do something like that, what are you going to put up in this place? How are you going to make people accountable for the wrong that they wind up doing, trying to survive? So you have to come up with a system that is just and fair. Right now, the government can't spell it, just or fair. And the only fair we got right now is the $1.25 we got to pay to get on a fucking bus to go from point A to point B. That's the only fair you got. There's no fair in how you treat one another. There's no fair in meeting people and wishing them a nice day. Because it's just something you say and keep going. If they stop to tell you, you don't have time. You know, so in this thing about the prison complex, we have to realize that the prison complex is us. We have to care about each other. We have to make sure that the person that we don't know, who has been suffering and going through this stuff, has an opportunity to live and exist comfortably in this world as they choose without the pressures that put on us because of your skin color, because of the clothes you wear, because of your disposition. Just because you happen to be born physically with a dick or a penis or a vagina or whatever, doesn't mean that you have to live by the rules that somebody else set up because you're not comfortable in it. Okay, let's go to Malachi. Hey, boo-boo.
Hey, I miss you, Major. I'm excited to see you soon. Get down there.
Yeah.
And thanks for everyone for allowing me to be virtual. I have some really intense family stuff with a transition happening right now in hospice. So thank you to Kendra and the host of the conference and stuff for letting me Skype in.
Cool.
What I thought maybe would work cool now, Major, I don't know if you're good with it, is to see if the audience has any questions.
Okay. It's up to you all. Who's running around? Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a statement that years ago, when I was close to 20 years ago, when I lived in Florida, I got into a situation in my home where I ended up in a date rape situation. And I knew the cops were next door, but I was so afraid to say anything because I didn't want it to get turned around and be blamed on me because I was the one who initially invited him in. And I never told anybody about it except for my closest friends, and they kind of turned on me and blamed me. So I, in turn, shut down. And moving forward, I never said anything. Like I was victimized in my home, and I blamed myself for a long time. And so when I'm hearing you talk and hearing him talk, you know, a lot is resonating in my head with my own situation where I was too afraid to talk to people that I knew. I knew these two ladies. One was a lesbian and her girlfriend, and they were cops. And they would take me to, you know, those NBA games. I didn't know nothing about sports, but I went with them anyway just to feel a part of the community. But when it came to my own situation, I had to look at them with four sets of eyes and saying, like, are they going to blame me or will they actually do something to help? But the fear of the whole thing, I just shut down. I didn't say anything. And essentially the guy just got away with the crime. And even though I told him, like, at the time, like, don't touch me, stop, this is not what we agreed to, he just kind of was stronger than me, so he just took over the situation. And he was violent. And so I just wanted to tell you about that because I never really said anything to anyone about it until now. Just hearing y'all's testimonies and stuff, it blows my mind that this kind of thing is still happening to people, and people are being punished for being victims, especially, you know, in trans community.
Well, baby, thank you so much for mentioning that. The thing is that you can't take that on yourself. One of the things that's going on, especially now in this country, is with this Me Too thing, where the women are finally standing up. Some people are acting like, oh, that's such a shock. Meanwhile, the shit's been going on since Adam and Eve.
Wow, yeah.
It was just him and her and two sons, and meanwhile there's 80 billion of us, so somebody was jumping on that one. You know, not that it was her sons or anything, but you know, that kind of thing has been going on for so long. And thank you for it coming coming out of that and mentioning it, you know. A lot of people suffer through stuff like that here. And it isn't just physical abuse, you know. There are the ways that some people treat their children by degrading them and calling them stupid or smacking them or sending them into a corner to, you know, stand for half an hour. There's all kinds of abuse, you know. And people do that stuff claiming that, oh, well, I love you. Well, I'm sorry, the love that I was thinking about had nothing to do with pain or hurt or bleeding or a black eye, you know. But congratulations to you to get to this point and to be the woman that you are today.
Thank you.
It's awfully important. Thank you, sweetie pie. Anybody else?
I have a question. Oh, go ahead. I'll let you go.
Thank you guys so much for having this talk for us. So my question was, once something like this, once I guess one of these like additional criminal acts happens to a trans person in the setting of them being incarcerated, how successful is it for them to actually get justice for that? Like, do they have to get a public defender? Is that something that's even a reality for them? If somebody is currently incarcerated, like, what happens after something's recognized?
You want to take this, honey?
Well, I think we can both chime in, but basically nothing. One of the reasons why I just wanted to commend the woman who spoke before was that just the resiliency, the ability to care for yourself, and in those kind of situations, I think it's incredibly strong to share your story now. And I just want to appreciate your strength and your resiliency to be here with us today. And then to the question that was posed, oftentimes internally inside facilities, you can fill out a complaint, you can fill out a form. Oftentimes, depending on the positionality, I had my own sort of experiences with the front end of the system, where people just didn't really want to hear anything. And time again, I think when people say they try to report it, the form is torn up, there's no action on it. If the powers that be don't want to do it, it often takes a good amount of pressure from outside advocates to shine the light so bright that they're forced to do something. Because this system is used to abusing people and getting away with it. And if anything, abusing people, keeping them longer and getting rewarded and paid for it. So it's not in the system's interest to process complaints or deal with it well, nor does it have a history of doing that. So I don't know, Major, if you'd want to add on something else.
The thing about it is, first of all, there's no accountability in that kind of a situation. And if they're housed within the prison system and waiting to go to trial, getting a public defender isn't going to do you any good because they're so overworked, so pressured, that all they want to do is make a deal, get you convicted, and send you on your merry way to prison. Getting just and fair treatment sounds really good, not going to happen.
No.
Everything is set up for people who get caught in that situation is to fail. You know, they're not going to negotiate a deal for your benefit. A lot of times in San Francisco, through TBI Justice, we used to try to go to court with girls in order to help them, instead of sending them in prison, put them in a facility, help them get them off of drugs, put them in a rehab place, let them have an opportunity to get a GED, learn some training, and come out and get a job. Well, they go, oh, that's really progressive and that's a good idea. No. You know, so how to make it better is people outside have got to complain about it. We have to unite as people that's out of the prison system. Because once you're involved in the prison system, nothing you say matters. Nothing counts. Even lawyers are really good at what they do, but it depends upon what they're getting out of it before it could be of any benefit to you or any other person. Okay?
Now, one thing that I'll add to that is there is a defense sort of strategy that's being piloted and is having some success. If y'all look up participatory defense, It's a concept that first was piloted in the juvenile system by community-based organizations kind of in the Central Valley in California. Now people are doing it in North Carolina, they're doing it in New York, they're doing it in Florida. And it's a whole set of things that community members can do to kind of get the back of the person who is being engaged in the system. So it's everything from a major set is a court accompaniment, advocacy, finding alternatives that say they'll accept the person, creating social emotional biographies, which are short videos that can be sent to the judge. That strategy has seen some success in getting people lower sentences and in getting penalties reduced. So if folks are interested in those kind of strategies, I would Google and look up participatory defense. Raj Jayadev is the guy who created the strategy, and it's interesting to check out.
Cool, I'll check that out myself.
Any other questions? Okay, I have one. I received a letter just last week from a trans woman who is incarcerated here in Arkansas, who is trying to create sort of a safety net for herself inside of the prison that she's been housed in. And the warden of her prison said basically that they don't have any of those kind of services and that she can't start a group. My question is, are there any rights? I mean, I think that there probably are no rights for prisoners, but I figure you guys would know because I want to help her and connect her to some resources on the outside that can advocate for her. But I really don't even know where to begin to tell her that she, maybe has a right to have certain types of groups, or I don't even know where to begin to help her.
Okay, one of the things here about Arkansas is rights. You kidding? There's no rights for anything here.
Yes,
Tenants
that's what I
don't
thought.
have rights. Workers don't have rights. They can just lock your ass up and throw you away here and feed you corn. But there are agencies and places that she can write to that aren't here that can help facilitate and bring information to her as to what she can and cannot try to slip underneath the radar. The Civil Liberties Union. She can also write to TGI Justice Project in San Francisco. She can get in touch with some of the people at SOM who deal with shit that's going on here in the South in order to get information together, because information is power. And if she can have some of that, maybe she can figure out a way to negotiate something that can be a benefit to her with or without the permission of the powers that be.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I would echo that. I would add the National Center for Lesbian Rights. Even though their title sounds very lesbian-centric, they definitely are down for trans folks and can provide some information. I also think that it can be effective also with a person's consent inside, you want to write her and see if it's cool, because there is sometimes blowback. But to gather basically a packet of information that you can bring to the warden and that you can bring to folks who run the prison to say, these are the kind of, if there's an organization that can go in the prison to help provide some kind of group or set up the group with this person, they are sometimes more apt to let outside facilitators come and via volunteer run education or skills or life kind of program. And so lobbying the warden with materials of, like, I'm from HRC, we're the bomb because we have all this stuff. Also, if you can get, which I'm happy to say, but I know that there's, for instance, a chief of police in a certain county who has a trans kid. She would probably be willing to write a letter to say a support program inside for trans people is so important because XYZ. So if you deliver a packet to them inside or some kind of space, here's what that could look like, and here's support for this kind of work from somebody else who's a peer in the justice field. Sometimes that kind of external help can really be helpful and help move the dial. because as nature was articulating, once you're inside, it's not just rights, but the assumption of your value and the seeing of your humanity is a wrap. It's real low. So hopefully that's helpful as well.
Yeah, that's helpful. Any other questions? Can you talk a little bit about TGI Justice and the work that you did with TGI Justice, both of you?
Oh, okay. Well, Jesus, you should probably start this since you were on the board.
I mean, you're the founder. Get with it.
That. Oops. Okay. What it was transgender gender and intersex justice project. It was more founded by Alex Lee, who was a young attorney at the time, still going to school. And what helped to correct a lot of the injustices that he saw happening to transgender women, particularly of color within the justice system, getting alternative prison just because of having to get some stupid for a bus stop, or going somewhere in the rain to go to the store. It became from there a manner of visiting the girls within the prison system and finding out what the harassments were, the abuses that they were suffering, and helping them to get an opportunity to realize that and work on trying to find some alternative in order to give them a sense of peace and to make a complaint about that happening to them within that system. We wound up on one girls information about what their rights were within the California system. California is a more aggressive state on the books there for most people within that state. If in regards to, like Malachi was before, having them be a good thing, but the people who have to enact that or to make it work are people who don't read that law. And if they do read it, they don't act on it. Don't to be paid for them not following the law. We wind up suffering criticism and the trans guys, and then started a letter campaign that we sent so that they could write to somebody. And it doesn't alleviate the pressures or the harm, but it does give you hope. It does connect you to another person. Because as human beings, we need to be connected to another person. We need to know that somebody out there gives a damn whether we live or die. We need to know that even though you're in this hole underneath this rock, buried beneath the sea, that somebody knows you're there and wants you to get out of there and do better. And I left there in 2015 when I retired. I could move down here to the south and create a larger complex of my girls who had to go to give them some sense of who they are and believe in themselves to raise our liability. Okay, good.
Okay. The only thing I would is so when TGIJP was being formed, it grew out of Alex's kind of work, grew out of a bunch of us holding down a group action. You remember Transaction Major was
God, yes.
1998?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was like 18 years old running around like, we're in this. And our main work, the things are we really try to get a bill of rights passed at the city level in San Francisco, which is supposedly one of the most progressive cities in the country. Didn't know about it. It's actually a playground for the rich, which is not very friendly to anyone who's not wealthy. Particularly, they're not wealthy and they're not sort of white gay males. We could not get a basic bill of rights passed through the city. And then Transaction did a direct action on the San Francisco Pride Parade. I think it was 1999 or 2000. But the police actually had a contingent in the Pride Parade. And while the contingent was going down the street, we jumped across the crowds and into the parade and put banners all the way around the police contingent that said, police beat trannies, we need a Bill of Rights, that kind of thing to try to apply more pressure. It was a really successful action, but we still did not get the Bill of Rights passed. And I think one of the things that Alex was thinking about is how do we actually think about building trans power? It's something that Ms. Major has done through the of work. It's not just one shot wonder, let's do an action on this parade, but how do we actually build power and build safety and build community so that people have their needs met, so that we're not penetrating the system and then have to pass a Bill of Rights that probably won't really mean anything beyond paper when we get caught up in these systems. So really, Major was just, I want to say, somebody who watched the evolution of TGIJP, whose wisdom and guidance really helped create clear priorities around that stuff and clear direction. And the work of TGI is different because Ms. Major has moved down to y'all's lovely area and is doing big things. But the work, as a testament to her leadership, has continued and has grown. And so part of the growth of that is a really strong entry program, which I think Major is speaking about, and also some work around helping the trans folks access health supports, and really self-determining what those are and what those look like. And so right now, it's a Stiletto newsletter that you can sign up for at TGIJP on the internet. Sign up for Stiletto, which is kind of a bias-forest newsletter that goes out. It goes out to a lot of folks in prisons across the country. And another thing I'd say to do is a lot of prison visits to try to identify, are there basic needs that can be met that people have right now? Sometimes it's sexy to write your legislature, run a campaign. But what folks might need is like a bra that is like 32D. You know what I'm saying? Figuring out if folks need specific things inside. Those or have with stakeholders in that prison. Sometimes it's like the nurses or the education staff that are more willing to help make some moves. But getting people some basic necessities inside is something TGI just always have a lot of love for TGI because it's not like campaign and political work is outside people's lives and lived experiences. People's lives are the work as the foundation of the work, and then we do some policy work as well. So just much respect to the legacy, to Major, and to TGI's work right now.
Thanks, Boo.
Anybody else have questions, or I'll just keep going?
Just one quick question about how difficult, like say if you're a person in prison and you have special needs as far as like say blood pressure, medicines and stuff of that nature, how does that work for people who have illnesses that are locked up?
Well, it really depends upon who is running the medical facility within the prison system and what they may or may not do. Like for a lot of trans women in the prison system, they don't want to give us our hormones, and they're really not concerned about what our physical health is. So depending upon who it is that you're seeing there, there may be a nurse in there who understands and will try to help you get a hold of something. But the premise is supposed to be that when they incarcerate and arrest you, your health and medical care becomes their responsibility. And it sounds really good, but that's not the way it goes down. They decide whether or not on each individual basis what they are or are not going to do. Yes,
just to kind of comment on that, we absolutely at UAMS have had pregnant women whose babies have died because they haven't brought them in when they've said that they've had some problem.
Wow.
Wow. Oh, jeez. Wow. See, it ain't changed. Thank you, dear, so much for that. So that answers that.
Thank you.
Well, I just had a question for everyone here, but just are you all involved in working with LGBTQ people inside the jails and prisons here? Do you know about any work that's happening in Arkansas around or Malachi, you might know that too, or Ms. Major?
Well, you just left another room, which is fine.
But the guy who's here next to me, Diego, he has this organization called Intransitive, which is in Northwest Arkansas, but they do a lot of work with people who are in prison up in that area. Not necessarily a ton of direct visits from what I know, but I also don't know a ton about it. But I know that they do some work on the more local level, and then also on a policy-based level as well.
Back with RSEC, we do have folks that write to the, like, send letters to the PO box address, and then we try to get, like, whoever gets to them first responds in a certain manner, but I don't know, like, I can't give you a direct list of, like, say, action items that have happened or things that have been done. I just know that there are connections being made, and that we have an emergency fund that we are actually trying to build up more money for right now, but to do things with it for folks who are in emergency situations. That work it's going on. It's not enough yet, and there's not enough going on yet, but there are things in the works happening. There's at least letter writing going on and trying to provide some kind of support, but I don't know how many people are actually involved in the writing back process or the, you know what I'm saying? So, but there's that small step in the notes.
Any other questions? I have one. Can you guys talk about solitary confinement and how often trans folks in particular are put into solitary confinement for their own protection?
Oh, just bring up my trauma here.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, protection. The premise is that by locking us up within that hole that they call it, is to keep us safe. And primarily they do that because if we're there, then they don't have to be concerned about who we are and what we're doing. And within the prison system, they use transgender women as pawns on a chessboard. They put women who are the closest thing to a passable-looking female person in a cell with some brute that they're having a hard time manipulating and keeping control over, who has extreme violent tendencies. And whatever he happens to do to this feminine person who's in this cell with him, they don't care. And so she can't complain about it or say anything about it, because then they'll beat her up and lock her up and then put her in a cell with somebody else to torture and abuse her. The thing about this solitary confinement is that there have been, I don't know, panels at the United Nations that I spoke at that have justified that over 15 days in the solitary confinement is considered to be ultimate torture. Meanwhile, there are trans people who have been in solitary confinement for 5 or 10 years, never getting an opportunity to see the light of day. And only because of some legal action about 10 years ago, they finally have to let them out for, I think it's an hour a day, to walk around in a guarded thing alone with no human contact, you know, which can have the tendency to drive somebody completely insane. We need to hear the voice of another person. There needs to at least be some kind of physical contact, you know. And so in this regard with what they're doing, this system is set up primarily to torture and abuse anybody that the system feels as if is not worthy of their existence, and so they penetrate and process that on a regular basis. You know? So it's not a fun thing.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you said. And I think that for the question before, like if you experience something, what's up with reporting it? Oftentimes people don't want to report it because it'll be an action used to keep you safe because you reported sexual assault. So it's like, oh, we can't keep you safe because you would look like a man or you look like a woman in this place that's very gender polar, and we can't be responsible for keeping you safe. That's special privileges. So we're gonna put you in the hole So we don't basically have to think about it, worry about it, or do anything to help keep you safe. So it's part of also what's used to perpetuate the silence and the abuse, is using that as a reaction to even people reporting assault. And this is, I will say further, this is the kind of stuff that people find out via prison visits and talking to other prisoners. And so doing things like hooking up with groups that are like family support groups or our general prisoner support groups are often really good, because it's through that info that you'll find out that a trans person has been in the hole for 3 years. You're not gonna find that out from an official. They don't have to report that anywhere. They don't even have to report that federally or to the state. And so oftentimes that type of thing you find out through a relationship with the nursing staff, education staff, or through visits with other folks who were locked out.
Could you tell me a little bit more about that Trans Bill of Rights that you were trying to pass? Like what was in it? And yeah, just kind of like what struggles did you have trying to pass it?
Totally.
Can I piggyback on that question and just ask if there's been a Trans Bill of Rights passed anywhere in the country? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Great questions. You know, it's been a while since that campaign. I think that was, you know, almost 20 years ago. I remember what was on it was some basic protections around right to counsel, which, you know, had to deal with public defenders. It had to deal with a mandatory level of very minimal police and sheriff training on how to deal with trans people they interact with on the street, like de-escalation training and that kind of stuff. So it was right to counsel. It was training for the staff and the police, the sheriffs, and the jails staff. And there was some stuff around the connection to supports. So when people are bumping up against public serving systems like public housing or other types of public agencies, that they would have a liaison at the Human Rights Commission that could be an advocate if they so needed, a trans advocate to help them navigate that public serving system. We tried to get that Bill of Rights passed by the Human Rights Commission that actually was led by a trans woman, who again, just because you might trans or whatnot doesn't mean you're aligned politically. And we could not get the Human Rights Commission to pass it. The staunch opposition came from the police union, and basically around like, we're so strapped, how are we supposed to have more training? Or we don't need the because we have gay officers. And so a lot of the pushback was around the capacity it would take to meet those bottom line demands, or those things that were asked for in the Bill of Rights. I can see if I can dig it up. I don't know if I would still have a copy of it. And I think, Kendra, your question is really important, and I don't know the answer to it. And so it might be something that we could take up trying to figure out for folks.
Awesome. Any other questions in the room? I'm not gonna ask anymore, I promise.
Has anything changed with the Obama era policy of like reform and closing prisons, or has that been just completely kicked out?
Oh, honey, I guess you haven't heard. Trump is the new president.
Oh
anything
my.
that has Obama on it is gone.
Oh my God.
He's eradicated everything. There's nothing that survived his administration at all. This lunatic is running amok. And the thing is that we have to just bide our time, put up with his bullshit, get his ass out of there, and then rebuild this. For me personally, I don't want anything to happen to him. I think he needs to be protected 24 hours a day. I don't want them to throw his ass out. I don't want them to kill him. Let him run amok, because he's a businessman. He's not a politician. All the shit he's doing, we can undo after he's gone. His vice president is a politician. That clown gets in there, all the shit that he's going to do will be written in stone. And we won't have any way of getting out of that without another revolution.
Yeah.
So we have to hang in there and get through this. As a people, we're stronger than the bullshit he has to throw in our general direction. His first ability to run around and try his best to make my transgender community etched on the endangered species list is not going to work. I'm not going to let my community feel weak and threatened and run and hide in a closet, in the back, under a box, behind some fucking book. We're going to stand there and be visible and let him know that we are still fucking here and we deserve and have the right to be. So, yeah,
And last thing is that, like, okay, so you have private prisons and you have these state-run prisons. I've heard of companies, very well-known companies, that fund these private prisons. So would it be best to boycott these companies that put money into funding these kind of private prisons that keep this system going?
Of course, we have to strategize and do whatever things and needs that are to us. And yes, but not just by yourself. Organize with other people. Find other folks who believe the same thing you believe. Work with other organizations. Find people who are connected, say within this room, or other people who believe like you believe, and then make it a mass effort. One or two people not going there is fine. But if a group of people don't go, they're so greedy, they'll miss 10 cents.
Wow.
And maybe it'll make a difference. It'll make a difference.
Yeah.
I see you over there. I know you can't see me. But I'm here, baby. So I guess it's that. Can I go eat now? Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. Not just in my community, but folks who are breathing, people who are suffering in prison. Thank you again for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Malachi, thank you for making the time. I know things are tough. We appreciate you. Much love. I'm around so Major can say hi.
Oh, good.
Yay, Smooch is coming, boo.
All right, so we just had a really good conference.
Oh, yeah. That's so tiny.
So exciting and so glad to meet Miss Majors.
I'm
really was informative.
I'm doing good.
And
life's
really great.
pain in the ass right
So
now,
bye,
but
everybody.
being part of stuff like this helps me keep going, you know?
Well, good. Give my best to Alicia.
Thank you.
And hang in there, sweetheart, okay?
I will. I love you lots. I'll see you soon.
Okay, you need me, call me, honey.
Thank you.
All right, baby. Bye.
All right, girl.
All right, bye, Malachi. I love you.
All right, Joe.
Thank you all again.
Thank you.